I had come home to visit one of my nephews. I was like, what do you want to do? I know you graduated from high school. You're kind of chilling with a bunch of guys, in a house. And he's like, you're the one that has pursued everything in your life and has been able to be successful, but you're miserable. And I don't know if I want to follow your advice.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Brand Power Analysis. Today I have on Kim Brady. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, Kim, and we can kind of continue the conversation from there.
Okay. So good morning to you and your podcast listeners. I am a Southern California native, born and raised, and played soccer my entire life since I was a kiddo, like 4 years old, and played and had the privilege and opportunity to play at Cal on a full ride scholarship and played soccer there. And when I went to college, we all knew none of us were going to be paid to play. One, we were women. And two, I was not on the national team, and it was before there was leagues, et cetera. So I knew I needed to get my education, and I knew that my exit from sport was inevitable, right, after college. And so I continued my education and pursued a master's degree in Michigan at Western Michigan University and became a family therapist. And I was not a couch therapist. I always have to explain that to people. The work that I did was in people's homes, in juvenile centers, in behavioral units, in schools, et cetera, and specialized in working with abused and neglected children. And when you're in that environment for a long period of time, you get burned out and you make no money. Two things that are not conducive to a healthy lifestyle. You are seeing abuse all the time, and then you have no money to show for the fact that you're also involved in these cases trying to help all these people. So I quit everything, and I couldn't afford to come back to California, which I wanted to do. I picked a place that was a little closer, so I went to Denver, Colorado, and I lived there for 15 years. And when I first got there, I got into sales. I was like, well, I have a people degree. This is something I like to talk to our athletes about, is if you do have a degree and it's a people degree, you're adaptable, right? And I'm like, I can learn skills. I can find something to do. I have 2 degrees. Let's learn how to make some money. Let's learn how to do sales. Sales is a fundamental skill that all of us need to have. So I got into sales and corporate sales and business-to-business sales and was in several different companies. And finally, in 2010, I just was miserable. And we kind of touched a little bit on this about the corporate lifestyle of the churn and burn of employees over time in lots of environments. And I was really burned out. And I had come home to visit one of my nephews. I have 4 nieces and nephews. And in 2010, I came home to visit, wanted to see the kiddo. He's 19 at the time. And, I was like, what do you want to do? I know you graduated from high school. You're kind of chilling with a bunch of guys, in a house, an apartment. But what do you really want to do? And he's like, Aunt Kim, you're the one that has pursued everything in your life and has been able to be successful, but you're miserable. And I don't know if I want to follow your advice. And I was like, holy crap, right? And I was like, okay, you're not wrong. And 3 weeks later, I quit my corporate job and thought I had this grand idea that I was going to start a coffee shop and build my own business and do my own thing on my own terms, right? I'm going to take in my nephew. He wanted to be a chef. Let me help raise him. And my financial advisor was like, you don't want to bring California to Denver. You want to move back home. So I'm not going to let you spend what tiny amount of money that you do have saved to build a coffee shop. You're going to be married to it. You're going to be living in it every single day. It's a brick and mortar. You don't have enough money. Think about something else. And so in 2010, I took a little bit of time, about 4 weeks, and really kind of honed in on what lifestyle I want to live and how am I going to achieve that. And then I built a residential housekeeping company. We could talk about that if you want. Built a residential housekeeping company, scaled that company over the course of 10 years and sold it 2 days before COVID shut the world on everyone.
Wow, you got lucky in that one.
Yeah, we can dive into that one. And a lot of people were like, well, what are you going to do now? Go back to therapy, get licensed. I was like, no, that chapter is closed, right? And they're like, well, why are you getting paid like helping other businesses? Because everyone asks you, how did you build a company? You've never taken a business class. How did you do that? And I always talked about, I used soccer principles. I used principles of sport and team and leadership to build my company because I wanted to do things totally as the antithesis of what we experience in corporate America. I wanted opportunity for growth for my employees. I wanted to care about my employees. I wanted to build a team, and my employees mattered more than anything else. So I wrote a book about my 10-year journey of building my business. And now as a business coach and business consultant, I specialize in helping small businesses now get off the ground, get launched, scale, and position them with a little bit of assistance. Unlike some business coaches have certifications because they've gone and gotten a certification or they have an MBA, but a lot of business coaches haven't actually been in the trenches like I have and built a company with labor and employees and then sold it. So yeah, that's my kind of 40-year journey, 50-year journey of my life. So,
Wow. 2 days before COVID.
March 15th, 2020. Yes.
But that sell itself must have been something that you guys were working on for. I mean, because a lot of people don't understand if their goal and their success is, I mean, you get a lot of business coaches that say this, right? They come out and they say right away, where do you want to be in 10 years? And I think it's a very convoluted question because yes, you could want to sell, but maybe you haven't evolved to the point where you want to do that yet. Yes, right. Think about it. If you're 70, 80, what are you going to do with your business? But it does. It takes upwards, 6 months to a year?
It was a year. And people ask me all the time, like, I also moved back home to California in 2017 and ran my business from my kitchen where you see me in 2017 and ran a labor-based, location-based business in Denver, Colorado. And people are like, how the hell did you do that? And I said, it was intentional. I always knew from day one in 2010, I was going to build something that would allow me to move home. I thought my business was going to be my retirement plan. We all have grand ideas when we start a business. We do. And when you bring up this subject matter of like, how long does it take to sell? You have to have intentionality. You have to have this ability as a business owner to think both in the present and in the future. So when you make decisions, are these decisions that are short-term to solve an immediate fire that is burning in your business in some way? We all wear multiple hats. There's always something to do. But is that solution that you're using adaptable and can it grow or scale over time? So because I had previous corporate experience and I had been working with small business owners as a payroll rep, I understood the importance of several things such as payroll and taxes and employee designation versus contractor. I understood how to work with CPAs and how to sit down with them and evaluate a P&L and talk to bankers and talk to attorneys to establish my foundation and not make short-term decisions just to solve a problem that would ultimately bankrupt me later if I had screwed it up. When you have labor, true labor, and telling them what time they show up, what rules they have to use, they are actual employees. You cannot make them contractors and pretend like they're not working for you. So this is a big deal. So some of those decisions of, I want to move to California, I started implementing in 2015, which was, I didn't have employees until 2012. So I was cleaning the houses by myself. This is what a lot of people don't understand too. I know what it's like to do sweat equity. And if a business owner is unwilling to do any of the work and just wants to outsource everything to everyone, and they say, well, this is your area of expertise, go fix it. That does not make a good working relationship with any vendor or any provider that you have. As a business owner, you have to be involved. You have to understand some semblance of what you are asking or paying someone else to do, because that is your vision and that is important for you to be part of. So from 2010, I started in October of 2010. So technically I've been an entrepreneur for 13 years now. I had employees 18 months later. So again, every decision that I was making was to have employees, but it took me a year and a half to make the 6 figures to be able to afford my employees, right? And then by 2015, I was in the position of a scaling model of how can I duplicate this, and how, if I were hit by a bus tomorrow, would my business still run? And so consistently was like, okay, I want to go home. How long can I be kind of hands off with my staff? Is it a day? Is it 2 days? And then I would practice things and then implement tests. So for 2 years, I was practicing me moving home. And then over the course of 2 more years, from 2017 to 2019, I started changing how I felt about wanting this to be my retirement plan, and things kind of started. I was like, kind of getting tired. This is hard to do absentee. Don't want to build this here in California. There's a lot of legalese and a lot of things that were associated with that. And I was like, I don't have the ability to do that here. Maybe I should look at a potential exit strategy. So I started really thinking about the exit strategy 2017, 2018, 2019. And then my manager wanted to move back to Houston, Texas. And when she told me, I love working for you, it's been 8 years at that point. I really think I want to move back to Houston. And I knew I wasn't going to move back to Denver. And I knew trying to replace my manager in that moment, this was my opportunity. So in 2019 was when I went into full mode. How do I find an owner to buy my business in a box? And so then it took almost 12, 13 months. And than to find the owner and do all that. It's a process. It's about 10 times worse than buying or selling a house. So if anybody has had a panic moment about buying a house or buying a car, selling a company is 10 times harder than that.
Well, and you had something, a lot of business owners, it takes some time, and you probably help teach part of your coaching as well, is you have that ability of understanding the finance side. And I think a lot of business owners, they kind of have a scary, especially at the beginning, and this is something else we'll talk about, but you had this ability to know, hey, my finances need to tell a story.
Yep.
Oh, if they're able to tell a story, and it still took you 12 to 13 months, and you had your finances probably down to a T in it. So back to what you said at the beginning, where you were really prone on, you did it yourself. You really pushed it for a year and a half, and nothing against the companies that get huge investments. You know, I will say that a lot of people these days think, hey, I'm going to grow and work hard to try to get this $1 million investment so I could pay my bills. And it's like, you don't really, you know, the majority of good businesses don't really get investments. You know, they have to learn. I think that particularly hits athletes quite well, but we'll talk about that in a second too. I always have a ton of stuff in my head that I connect from what you talk about, but you did it yourself. So you did it yourself for 1 or 2 years. You learned certain things. And I think that's a good sign of a leader and not a delegator, because you had to lead by example. You had to showcase, hey, I did this. I learned enough. It may not have been to a point where you were like 100% the best cleaner in the world, but you got to a point where you were like, hey, I did this. I worked really hard for a couple of years, so that your team, and you start building your values for what you want in the business. You can transition that to your employees. How did that work for you?
So there are a couple things, and you talked about it. You actually said it a few times in different ways. Walking your talk as a leader is huge. People want to have a leader they want to follow. And for athletes, especially, all of us can probably attest to the majority of our coaching that we've had is good. Maybe 1 or 2 is great. And maybe 1 or 2 are really horrible coaches, right? If we've had a career in athletics, we've had good, bad, and ugly, right? My hope was, how can I be a leader that people want to follow? Because I never saw myself as a leader. I was never a captain of my team. I was a very quiet leader in that I would work my ass off as a player. And yes, I was a starter. And yes, I won awards. And yes, I had all those things, but I didn't talk about them. I didn't recognize I was elite as a player until I left college. And people were like, holy shit, you did what? And I'm like, well, everyone around me was better than me. That was my perception. Okay. So as a female athlete, and the women who were playing on the national team, that was the pinnacle. So if I wasn't there at the pinnacle of their level, I didn't see myself as an elite athlete, which is a very bizarre thing to now think about. Because now I look at it and go, holy shit, that was awesome. You know, yeah, I was damn good, you know. But I didn't feel it that way. So even when I went into my business model, I was like, I need to know how to do this, and I need to be able to train other people how to do this. And so I need to get skills and training. So this is the thing. I read every book possible on building cleaning companies. I interviewed and called people who owned their own cleaning companies. I cold called people. I asked people in my network, do you know someone who owns a cleaning company? And they're like, yeah, I do. Because I happen to know a lot of small business owners. So I was like, do you mind? Can I call you and can I take you to lunch? And they were so gracious. They were like, oh my gosh, you know, you really want to do this. So I sought out mentorship by people who had done it. And the other thing was, I hired a coach. So when I was in that place of having to understand finances, what dip am I going to take when I hire an employee? Of my own bottom line, my own profit margin, can I still pay my bills? If I take the dip initially to hire these employees, how do I keep them, right? Because the onboarding process and taking someone on will cause a dip in your income, and you have to train them up so that you can replace the income that you lost to get them where they need to be. And so I did my removal of me being part of the cleaning process over another 2.5 years. I still work side by side with my team, and sometimes they did their own and sometimes they didn't. We worked as a team, etc. So they knew that I never asked them to do something I was unwilling to do. So I never took on really horrible houses. If I don't want to clean a hoarding house, why would I put my employees in a hoarding house, right? If I didn't have the capacity to clean a massive commercial building, why would I task my employees to do that when I don't have the ability to do that? So knowing that I was willing to work side by side with them, they were like, she's a leader I want to follow, because they trusted me and they knew that I would do the work that I asked them to do. And the piece of hiring a coach, I hired 3 over the course of those 10 years. One was to help me hire my employees for the very first time, because I did need to learn about the finances. It's one thing when you're taking care of yourself. It's another when you're responsible for the pay of another person. It's a big deal, and you need to do it right. And you need to care about how the process works. Don't get a big ego, people. If you think you're going to have a big ego and just have people work for you and get to, point a wand and point and shoot, you're going to fail epically, because people don't want to follow a leader like that. And so I hired a coach to help me with that process. And then as I scaled, and I was really kind of like, I need to double and triple this. And this is the other kind of fallacy or myth that a lot of brand new business owners have. They think they're going to make millions of dollars when they start their business. Yeah. We know, you and I know, that 95% of all businesses fail in their first 5 years. So to make it past the 5-year mark, I was already elite. I was in the 5% of small business owners who succeeded. But it wasn't $1 million business, but I ran it like it was. And it's capable of becoming that. And it's still in business with the new owner because of the things that I put in place. So you have to have an intentionality of growth, but grow in a manner that you can manage, because this is what happens with angel investing as well. One, you give up equity half the time, and you have a bunch of people telling you what to do with your money because they gave it to you. And so they have a say in how you want to build something or how quickly you want to build it. Most small businesses are under the 2 million mark. Most of them, 90% of them. So when you see that people have done exits, most of the time they're in that 6-figure mark. People don't realize that. Yes, you can leverage your money. Yes, you can have your money work harder than you. And yes, you can become a multi-millionaire with having a business that's not $1 million entity. It's understanding money and having money work for you and putting it in multiple arenas. So yes, you can have a business structure, you can have employees, and then you can take some of those profits and build another business, or you can have another income stream. You can become a multi-millionaire with a business that's not $1 million business. And that is the beauty of business. It's why I love it so much, is there's opportunity. But the work ethic that you have to make sure that you treat your people right so that you can build that, and it is a scalable entity, you have to do the work. I just believe in doing the work. And it's maybe it's because my grandparents were immigrants, and they came from Italy and they didn't have an education. And I was raised in treating the janitors the same way as a CEO. And I joke with people that I was both, I think it's just that athlete grind and the discipline of doing what it takes when no one's watching,
Well, and another 2 things you brought up there is, one, you were at this point when you had to learn your finances where you're like, what happens if I bring someone in? And because I think that's especially now with all of the gurus, saying the one saying, oh, you can make $1 million tomorrow, or you can be
You're going to make 5-figure months in 6 months. Watch me grow.
Watch me grow. And there's multiple stages to business. And you knew that you were at a certain point where you were like, I'm not going to make as much money. Like, because you were working hard, you had to start delegating, but you also knew off the bat that it's a mindset shift. It really is a huge mindset shift for many. And in today's market, everyone just goes, oh, I want to be a personal brand. I want to do this. And it's like, okay, well, doing it all yourself is great, but you're going to, one, have burnout.
Yes.
2, you're going to have to go this mindset shift where you're like, I'm going to go from 50% profit margins to around the average of around 20, maybe 30, depending on, even 10, depending on which market you're in. And that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. So that is one of those situations where I have seen with that 5-year gap period that you talk about. When we did our research, a lot of it came down to that well-being of the business owner and that mindset shift on, and I went through this shift myself, where it was like, why is it now that I'm making this, I'm stagnant at this spot? Like, why am I not growing? And a lot of, depending on your coach or who you talk to, depending on how advanced they are in their own progress of growing a business, they may say to you that, you just have to delegate. But as you said, there's still a fine line between just delegating everything and building those values and starting to build those systems up properly. And that goes to what you said about setting up systems.
Yeah. And I think this is a common myth also. You just touched on it. When you talk with people, they say, well, you need to delegate. Well, let's look at what tasks are you delegating, and are they revenue generating tasks? So some people are like, oh, I need to hire a salesperson. I need to duplicate my sales. Okay. You have to train someone in the sales of your brand. Okay. So there were two things that I needed to look at. One, I knew physically, because what I did on my daily task, I wrote about this in my book, but it was like, I would get up in the morning and check every single one of my emails. So I was up at 6 a.m. or whatever. And then I would go clean 1 to 2 houses a day, fielding calls, right? So I was fielding calls. I was doing things while I was in people's homes cleaning. And then say a lead came in and said, we have a referral for you, or we need to have a cleaner. I'm like, okay, I'm finishing cleaning a home right now. So when I come to your house, just know I'm going to have a do-rag on my head and I'm not going to be fully clean. I would prepare them for how I was going to appear, because I couldn't really appear professionally because I was just cleaning for 6 hours. So I was like, hey, I'll come at your home. This is what I'll do, blah, 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 blah. And then I would go and do an estimate, and then I would tell them, this is what we're going to do. And then I would come home at night and I would write down the estimate. I would write down the email. And then I would document the processes every single day of what I did every day to write my operations manual. And I worked literally 15 hours a day those first 2 years. And so I was like, I have to do two things. One, I need to hire someone who's a better cleaner than me, because I can't continue to fully clean. I need to get out of the technical part of my business a little bit, which is a big dip. That's where the profit is going to go away, because I'm no longer just taking in the money and that person's not selling, right? That person is just going to clean. Then the other part was, okay, how do I double the amount of estimates that I need to get? How do I replace the income or revenue generation loss? So I needed to get better at sales. So it was, you have to decide, if I delegate this, what do I need to double down on to replace that profit loss? And a lot of business owners don't think like that, because they're so worried about or so exhausted by being in the daily grind that they're not constantly thinking, or they don't realize that when you do hire someone who may not have sales experience. So one of my employees, she has 0 sales experience, okay? But she wanted to become a manager, which is ultimately the woman that did become my manager, right? But when I needed to field calls, or I was in networking meetings, or I was doing the other part of marketing my business in networking groups, and now I was, the face of business with employees doing some of the work, I wanted to teach her how to do estimates. So I closed at a 90% ratio. It was my business. I know I've had years of sales experience, right? She was a cleaner her whole life, and she had an 8th grade education. She was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. She was not educated, so she didn't know that she was capable of learning these skills. She's a phenomenal person, but she just wasn't taught. And so I knew if she wanted to become in a field manager role, where she would be fielding calls and where she would be training employees and where she would be talking with potential owners about estimates, I would also take another dip in sales. So I knew she wasn't going to close at 90%. So I had to, again, accommodate for this shift in my employee development. And if leaders just think they're hiring someone and don't put the investment in the development of their employees and training them properly, just because someone comes to the table with experience, they need to learn your fundamentals. They need to learn your ethos, your work ethic, your brand, your style, etc. And you have to dive into developing those people that you've selected to represent you. And they're a reflection of you. So if you don't like them, you have to look in the mirror and go, well, why did I make a bad hire? It all comes back to you. And so it's not about that person being a bad hire. It's about you being a bad leader. And a lot of people get the ego in the way and say, well, this employee sucks. Well, what did you do to develop them? Did you teach them? Did you understand that they don't have the same closing ratio as you? Did you have the expectation laid that they have to make phone calls? They can't just write emails, right? So, and she struggled with writing emails because of her lack of education. And so she would just have me review them. So I knew that they would go out properly. And I was okay with that. I wanted to develop her. She ultimately ended up becoming my manager. And most people wouldn't make a $65,000 a year salary with an eighth grade education. And that's what she made working for me. So I'm very proud of developing her over time. That's why she stayed with me for 10 years, you know? So as a leader, when you're worried about two things, profit margin and employee retention, it all comes back to how good of a leader you are to develop and train your employees, and how do you treat them in the process. And you're going to turn and burn all the time if you don't invest in both.
Well, it's funny you say that because, you know, as I said before we jumped on this call, a lot of people assume, and it's something that I really preach, they just assume branding is, oh, just create this logo, just create this, you know, website. Yeah, those are marketing material that you would need, but branding isn't just about that. Like you talked a lot about up front, how you had to do certain things, how the people you hire are a representation of yourself. And that comes down to customer service, that comes down to reputation. And yeah, as you know, like the system that we're in right now, the environment, like that retention of employees can shift. You don't, you could always have people that come in and that just lie, and you do your best.
1,000%.
I mean, you have to have that.
Yeah, I have horror stories. We all have horror stories.
Yeah,
sure.
I have horror stories. But at the end of the day, they are a representation of yourself. And so being a personal brand and being at that gap period or moving up from stage 2 or stage 3, depending on the type of business you're in, it all starts with your values and who you are. And so those values should, when people look at your business, your business is an identity of the culture that you bring inside. And so you were able to take your brand, the stuff that you learned, build that confidence and that connection with people internally that really represented to where you wanted to go. And so you evolved as a person and were able to, and that's branding. That's branding.
Yeah.
And that can be seen amongst your clients.
Yeah.
You know, when you, I mean, there's an example I like to use. I don't want to talk about the company, but there's a large influencer right now. He sold his business some years ago, and we actually had a prospect come in that was using that sold business. And their model was just, the way they said that they were representing themselves was just horrible. They had horrible customer service. And when I was talking to the prospect, I was like, this is basically what branding is. I mean, it's that, yeah, those visuals and that logo and stuff do build that confidence when people go, okay, they have their crap together. You know, like I see them first sign, they know what they're doing. They put a lot of effort into what they're doing to build a experience for us. It's very similar to how you build it internally with your team. And so I love to have you talk about that a little bit and how you really, and we've talked about this before, so I think this is a good topic on how you really took your, especially when you reached stage 2 or stage 3, when you're in ready to sell, how you really pushed and advocated, especially for athletes. Because I do want to get into athletes a little bit, because as we are aware, you didn't have that. When it comes down to it, you didn't have that confidence. When you were an athlete, you know, you were like, hey, I had these leadership skills. I didn't know them. It did. It probably came back to you realize, oh, it was my confidence to be able to portray that confidence to the fans, you know? So that is the same concept as leadership skills for athletes. And the one downfall I see from athletes is that they have, especially during this transition, is one, they just want everyone to do it for them, but they didn't learn any of those failures and those tribulations upon the road. But two, they don't realize how much hard work it really is to build something that's your own, you know? And so I'd love you to talk about that a little bit, and about that value, and how, if an athlete's making that transition, how they could possibly, what are some of those first steps that they could take with themselves as they grind? Because they're going to be grinding the first couple of years, no matter what. And how they could take that grind and how they could build those values to start getting to the point where they can take that next step.
Well, I think one of the biggest hurdles that all of us face if we're high achievers, is, especially with athletes, is we forget how many years of exercise, discipline, practice, putting it in that we did to get and attain the levels that we're at. We forget we started when we were little, and we weren't possibly good sometimes, or maybe we had an athletic ability, we had talent, but it needed to be honed. We were raw, we were beginners, right? And there's a couple things, and we know this, corporate America chases after athletes. They love our successes. They love our high achievement. They don't think of us as human beings. We know this, right? We're high achievers because this person has done this, therefore they will do this. and they look down upon, or I hate when people call it soft skills. These are the intangibles that everybody wishes they had, but athletes have tenfold: grit, resilience. I see your Angela Duckworth book behind you. You know, it's like all of these things you learn how to do when you fail repeatedly. So when you're at practicing, you're training. If you train lightly and you go into a match, you're going to get crushed. But if you train hard and you train extra and you go in early, I mean, Stephen Curry is the best shooter ever because he shoots every single day of his life to be the best shooter in the NBA, right? He's a phenomenal human being to do that work, but he wasn't the kid that they thought would become that, right? So when you work in a business or you're starting a business for the first time, there's two things. You have to hone those soft skills and tap into them and do it with a beginner mindset. What do I need to learn and how many reps do I need to put in to really understand this new game of business? Because business is a game and it's the only thing that has replicated soccer for me. And you're going to suck in the beginning. Get over it.
You're always going to suck. Funny enough, you're always going to suck at something in your business. And that's the thing that people need to grasp is you're never going to be perfect.
You're never going to be fantastic at everything. But having a genuine understanding of the thing you suck at, I hate technology of figuring out how to automate a bunch of shit with my business. I hire someone to do it, but I need to understand enough of it so that my message comes across, so that when I'm writing content, it matches what's on my website and it matches the brand and the image that I want to portray, right? So you have to learn. I constantly have books that I'm reading. I'm reaching out to marketers like yourself. These are talents that you guys have that I don't feel that I have, but I have an ability to do operations and put systems together and link things and see a gap. I can see a vision. It's a soccer thing. Have a head on a swivel to constantly know where's the pass forward, where's the pass to the side, where's the pass behind me, where's this player running? How do I put all these puzzle pieces together? It's chess on steroids. I like that, but there's things that I'm not good at. And being able to go, okay, I'm a beginner. This is hard. What do I need to learn? And it's this constant craving of learning. And to hone in on that part of you as an athlete of what kept you going when things were hard? What kept you going when you had an injury? What kept you going when you had a coach you didn't want to work with? What happened when you got in a fight with a teammate? What happened when your life was really shitty and someone passed away in your personal life and yet you still had to show up and you still had to play? What about when you were sick? You still had to play. That's the same mentality that you have to take in being a business owner, because business doesn't stop even if you do. And you have to have that mentality. So transitioning for athletes is very difficult because they want to be good at it right away. They want to be awesome at it right away. And there's a humility that you kind of have to go, okay, I can learn again. This is not always going to be easy. How do I become elite in this new thing that I'm doing? So I want to become an elite business coach. I've only been doing my business coaching practice for 3 years. I've been an entrepreneur for 13. So I take the skills that I'm learning and practicing them more and teaching my clients how to do those things now. But do I feel I'm the best business coach there is? No, because there's a bunch of entrepreneurs who've been doing this twice as long as me, 3 times as long as me, and I want to learn from them. So I'm in a networking group with high-level athletes and entrepreneurs that I just literally soak up information and take time to learn. How can I get better? How can I get better? Who do I need to know? And that piece of who you are as an athlete is so replicatable in business, but you have to really put your ego aside. It's going to get crushed quite a few times. And when it's your pocketbook that gets crushed versus your ego, you can definitely feel that pain much further. So you have to be careful with what you do with your money. Be smart.
It's funny. You have to be smart. And then, so there's this fine line, because I see that athletes tend to, and this is for most business owners, they tend to not separate the difference between, this is going to be something of value that's going to lower my risk and provide greatness in the future for my business. And, I just need to hire this person down the street to implement this thing for me. Why do you cost so much, or why do you do this? And it's that risk. And athletes tend to say, oh, well, either I'm going to spend $1 million on investing in this thing. And I'll be real with everyone on here. Investments, it's just like business. 1 out of every 100,000 make it. you're basically giving money to someone else to it's even riskier than just creating your own thing. Yeah, there's a lot more work involved in business, but this got brought up in my head because whenever I have sales calls, whenever I'm talking to someone, I don't even like to call them sales calls. I like to call them connection calls because I'm more about connecting with people. And, you know, when I'm connecting with someone and I'm going through my go-through on building a relationship with them, one of the biggest questions I ask them straight up is, what's your gross revenue right now? And, you know, and it should be something that most business owners or marketing directors of higher end businesses should have an understanding of, but two, be willing to say. And they're always like, why do I have to tell you how much money I make in the business? And I'm like, well, it's pretty common that this percentage of money goes to marketing. And if you want to be able to leverage us, I have to determine off the bat here what is going to be the most effective for you depending on where you're at in business. Because I'm not just going to come out here and say, hey, pay us $20 an hour. And by the way, that is not even close to what my hourly is.
That is not even close. But yeah, let's qualify to anyone listening. That's not even close to what a marketing budget is requiring. Yeah.
But it's required. I get it. And I'll have clients up front that I'll be like, you know, prospects that I know I'm not a good fit for. But back to your point, it's that mindset. It's back to what you said about business owners being at a certain point and having to understand the hard work in getting to certain spots. My wife says to me all the time, she's like, you have to tell people what SEO is. Like, what's it stand for? And I'm like, no, because if I have to tell people what certain online preferences that they need, yes, I'm not saying that they should know how to do it, but if they don't understand the basics of certain systems, then they're not at a right place in business to even hire this out yet. And nothing against those business owners, but they're just not ready. So back to what you said, I said about them not giving their budget, and back to athletes and success. Athletes, you're right. Like when they're in the game, money is of course always going to be a determining factor. But back to that lower dip we talked about, there comes a point when you realize money isn't a driving factor for me anymore. Like it's the growth of my employees, it's the growth of helping customers, and that's what moves the needle. So when companies are like, why do I have to tell you the money? It's like, well, if you're an athlete and you're looking for success to be about making that next dollar, that's not what it's about. It's about finding your purpose and being able to, you know, leave your legacy, right? So it's just funny you said that because it reminded me of, it's an easy disqualification question for me. It's really just how much money are you making? Because one direction, I can help you. One direction, well, how am I going to help you? You know, like, you know, we're getting close to the end of the podcast now. We can rant on forever. I didn't mean to take up that last couple of minutes. I love hearing your take on this. I think that we could possibly have you on for another one here in a couple months.
A high compliment to being asked back. It's funny. I've had two people who have been on their podcast. So like, I need to have you back for a second one. And to me, it means a lot because it shows the value of what I want to provide for you and your listeners. And that for anyone listening to us talk today, I think the biggest piece of the puzzle is each of us have a skill set that we feel passionate about. And even if you're good at something, and I know you've had to niche down in certain areas, and I've had to niche down in certain areas, just because you're good at something doesn't mean you enjoy doing that thing. So whenever I talk with people about being an entrepreneur, because I have two paths for people to work with me, and I am the same as you. Before we even get on a call, if someone is doing an initial consultation with me, they're sent a form and it asks them, how much are you making in your business? So I second your question. I need to know where you are in order to take you to another level. And that gives me a baseline. It's not to get into your financials and how you got there. It's to understand the baseline and what we're working with so that I can figure out whether we're going to be a good fit or not. And it's not negative. It's not a negative question, and it shouldn't be a personal question. You should learn how to talk about financials with people who you're entrusting to be a part of your business. So the piece of how to work with each other doesn't always have to be an exchange of money. You can edify a business person in a way that, hey, I can't afford this person yet, but I trust him or her. I've referred people to you. I know they weren't able to use you, but it was like, he has this skill set. This is a skill he has. I want you to sit down and talk with him, and he would be a great fit for you. And that's what you're building. We're building connections and relationships. Business is always about people. If it's only about money, you're epically going to fail because you're chasing a decimal point in your business and not being people oriented. And if you are investing in a business, invest in yourself and invest in other business owners that can help take you to another level. You can't do business alone. There's not a single ounce of entrepreneurship that I have done by myself. Yes, I built my business, but I did it with other people, always, whether it's my employees, whether it was my networking connections, whether it was my quote unquote, what I call my board of directors, which were my advisors, my CPA, my attorney, my financial advisor, my banker, my insurance agent, other business owners. I had board of advisors who were military, leadership. Talk to me about how I can become a better leader. I have 8 employees. I need to know how to manage my 8 employees. I had to learn logistics. I had to learn territory management because my employees were going to homes all over a city. I had to figure these things out. It wasn't something that I knew off the top of my head when I started, but it was something that I had to grow into. And that's the piece about business that I love the most is I'm constantly growing. I'm constantly changing and I want to get better. And that's the pursuit of just purpose, right?
Yeah.
So if people are listening and they want to become an entrepreneur and they haven't figured that out, or if they already are and they are really trying to grow their brand and their stuff, go back deeply inside of yourself and find out what your purpose-driven missions are in your life, because that's why you go into it. That's why you loved your sport, right? Like I get emotional, I get passionate. It pisses me off if someone doesn't follow their dreams and they just become robotic and they just do this thing and they think they can buy a template from some guru online who made a lot of money and think if they could just replicate it like how he or she did it, they're going to have the same success.
Who they think made a lot of money. Let's go with
There's that, right? Yeah. They're dangling the carrot of this is how much money we're making. And you're looking at them going, how? And you never hear the how. You never see the grind and you never see the pain. You only see, oh, this is how shiny it is. Don't chase the shiny object. Figure out what your purpose is, because that's the only way that's going to keep you going when the shit gets hard. Because entrepreneurship is hard, but it's worth it. And that's the piece that I always felt about being an athlete. Everybody's like, God, how did you do that? How did you have multiple jobs and train every single day and do all this stuff? I was like, I loved it. The good amount and the ugly, I loved it. And that's the same thing with business. You know,
Sure.
None of my friends, none of my closest friends that I grew up with are entrepreneurs. I'm the only one. They're like, I don't understand how you do that. Like,
You want to hear something funny? And you probably have the same feeling. When you started your business, I remember I was, at my corporate job, and I knew for about a year that I was getting ready to leave, and I got this huge opportunity to go to, and it was more of a freelance gig, but I got this opportunity to go to New York for 3 months, work with American Express. They were going to pay for everything, do this, and I turned it down. I remember I turned it down because there's this risk factor involved where I was like, even though it was double the pay and 1/3 the time, I was like, well, what am I going to do after that? And I was scared and I turned it down. I tried to get it back a week later and they told me they gave it to somebody else. So I never got it, but it was that deciding factor in my life that was like, you know what, I'm going to plan this out. I'm going to go out on my own. But that day that I left, it literally was a flip of a switch within one day where I was like, you know what? It's actually less risk for me to have my own thing.
There you go. That statement right there. That statement right there.
Yeah.
Because when you're preparing for the exit, how you feel when the exit happens is so different. Like when my nephew said, you're miserable, Aunt Kim, you've been at this job for 3 years and I've never seen you so unhappy. And I was like, that's just so devastating to hear one of your kiddos say that to you. I adored my kids, right? And I wanted to be good for them. And I remember 2 weeks later when I walked into my boss's office. Now, mind you, he was a very good boss. The boss that I actually was under her purview was a horrible boss, which is part of the reason why I was in his toxic work environment. But I stayed there because I felt I had to, right? I have to put a roof over my head. I have to make money. I have to do this. And I'm good at it. And da-da-da-da-da. I was very good at what I chose to do because I'm going to learn. I'm an intelligent human being. But I was miserable. When I walked into Ryan's office and I said, I'm putting in my 2 weeks. I can't do this anymore. And I said it just like that. And he goes, what do you mean? And I go, all of this corporate thing is not me. I can't do this anymore. I'm not leading by example to my kiddos. And he's like, what are you going to do? And I go, I don't know. But the amount of relief that I felt to choose me, I chose me. It was like, I'm intelligent. I'm educated. I have a lot of life skills and a lot of work skills, and I have work experience. I could always go back and find a job, but I'm going to bet on myself. And my nephew needs to see that. And that was the thing. It was the amount of relief that I felt making that decision. It wasn't that I had to have all the answers behind it. It was making that decision, like you just said, of it's so much more risky to live a life that everybody else thinks you're supposed to live instead of following what really drives you. And so many of us, as we become adults, that's what the athlete thing is too. We pursued a sport because we loved it as a person, as a young person. Yes, it becomes our job. Yes, it becomes an all day, everyday thing. But to choose something with a curiosity and a purpose of learning, I'm going to figure this out. There's something so raw about that just feels like it's not childlike or childish, which people think, but it really is tapping into your dream space again. The opportunity all of a sudden becomes so much bigger. The world becomes so much bigger. Like, so many people are capable of doing things. Why not me? I don't have to do this corporate grind this way anymore. Why not me? If he can do it or she can do it, why not me? And then you find those mentors and you become the student of the game again and the student of business. And so I completely appreciate that part of what your journey was. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I think that, and there's nothing wrong with people staying in the corporate world. I mean, 90% of, people, I don't know the exact number, but most of people in this world are in corporate jobs. And if that's what you want to do and you want to sit there, I mean, a lot of my employees, for instance, they don't want to own a business. They just love to design.
Yeah.
They just love to develop.
My employees absolutely were like, I can't imagine owning a business, but I love working for you. Thank you for building this. I want to work for you.
Yeah. They don't want to deal with the taxes. They don't want to deal with all that. Okay, great. But at the same time, you have to submit that culture within your organization to be like, hey, like, these are our finances. Like, this is what we're working with. I don't just go in and, and this is to everyone else out there as well. You don't just go in and this happens a lot when you talk to friends that are in the corporate world. You're like, how many, you're like, oh, we made $500,000 or $1 million this year, or $2 million, $3 million. You're like, wow, like, you must be pretty rich. And it's like, 10% of that maybe goes to maybe owner withdrawal, so maybe 100, and then of course I have a W-2 side as well, and I have to invest it, so I have money saved. Or we don't have clients. Like, I really only take home maybe 65 a year. And so they don't necessarily understand that. The business decided, getting them to understand, like, hey, what you do, if you're passionate about it, like, great. Like, you need to be able to go in and you need to be able to hone this skill. But I get it, it's your passion. But like you said earlier, like, we need profits. Like, I'm not just here to pay you every day. Like, this is a give and take. I give you a paycheck. Like, I'm helping you grow your family. You're helping us by growing the income of the business. Like, that's the give and take is. So I think people need to somewhat kind of understand that, especially if you're going into a small business, you get with everything going on with society the last couple of years, we've gotten into this point of online, I want to work from home, and it's turned into this is no longer a benefit to work with us. It's more of, it's a requirement. And it's like, I'm sorry, like, we still need you to work 8 hours a day here. Like, I'm not paying you, I'm not paying taxes, I'm not paying this to let you do this, but it's okay if you need to take 2 hours off to go take your kid to school or to do this. Like, just make sure you make up those hours. And back to those soft skills, I think that you're right. I think that soft skills are so much more important in today's environment than some of those harder skills, because damned if I could just, have people come in and be able to track their time effectively, like, it's, but, yeah, so it was great to have you on the podcast. Is there anything else like that you would love to tell the listeners before we end it for the day?
Yeah, I mean, I know you and I both, we want to have ideal clients and we want to have people that we can help. And I have 2 pathways that people can work with me. In that I have a brand new, I call it my Sprint to Startup Accelerator. It's for brand new people who have never done entrepreneurship and they would really like to go into it. I have a 12-week accelerator that gets your concept, your idea, your mindset, some of your operations, like, really kind of honed and developed in a 30, 60, 90-day plan to get you started. And I also have a pathway for people who've been in business for a little while. And I love small business. That's my jam. That's what I do. I work with small business owners. So whether someone wants to hire me for 1 hour a week for 3 months or hire me up to 15 hours a week, I have the capacity and the ability to take on clients right now in each of these arenas. So even if someone is like, I don't know if you're the right fit, I have a complimentary discovery call. Yes, you will fill out a brief form, kind of where are you at, what are your goals and desires, and possibly give me a little bit of information. So when we talk, we can determine whether or not I'd be a right fit for you. But I have pathways for people to start with even a la carte hours all the way up to purchasing a retainer. So don't get intimidated by business coaches, but seek out the people who've done it. Don't talk about, all the little bells and whistles. You'll be in my kitchen with me like Zach is. And, I've done it, and I've found that I'm one of the few people that has actually gone through all 3 stages of business, of selling a successful business. And it's still in place, and my first employee still works for the new owner. And I think that speaks to the quality of how I built my company. So I'm looking for clients. I would love to talk with you.
Beautiful, beautiful. And if anyone's listening, you do have the link at the bottom of this podcast. This will also become a video cast too, where we're going to kind of, separate out into multiple videos on the channel. So
Awesome.
We'll also put those links down there as well, so people can get a contact of you and be able to reach out to you. But Kim, I really do appreciate having you on again, and we'll definitely have you on again soon.
All right, Zach. Thanks so much.